Welcome to Exposure Therapy, and today my guest is Daniel Agee, community marketing over at Glass, which is a new app for photographers, which I've fallen in love with as of late. And so I thought I'd reach out to see if one of the minds over there wouldn't mind coming over here to have a little chat about the app and give it a little bit of a spotlight. So Daniel, thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I am always here to talk about photos and nice things on the internet. That's like my whole thing.
Awesome. Appreciate that. So you yourself are a photographer as well. I've seen your stuff on Glass, and maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about you and kind of how you got into the art of photography.
Yeah, so I grew up in relatively rural Idaho, middle of nowhere. Had to drive for 45 minutes for anything worth doing, sort of middle of nowhere. And I grew up not straight. And so, like a queer kid in the 90s in Idaho was not a good thing to be, right? Wasn't wasn't a enjoyable time. And so I spent a lot of time with myself and my own hobbies. And, my grandfather was a photographer. My father was a photojournalist before he went into radio. And I just kind of, used it as an outlet for myself and my creativity. But it wasn't until I found photography on the internet that it really all kind of like came together, and I, like came alive as a human being. I remember finding Flickr as a teen. I was like 11 or 12 when I signed up for Flickr. And like the community that I found there, like I can now easily say saved my life, right? It completely shifted into who I could become and what I could do with my life and my time and how I could spend it, and the friends that I could find. And so, I just really poured myself into it for a few years and really, really loved it. Started shooting concerts, started shooting, my friends' portraits for MySpace and for early Facebook profile photos, that sort of thing. And just kind of like fell into a photography career without, really thinking about the ramifications of doing this thing that I love that has given me a sense of purpose when I didn't have one for money, right? Like through a capitalism onto my treasured hobby, and that went as well as it always does, really poorly. And so I got really burned out after 4 or 5 years. I think there's like this a lot of photographers that I've talked to since, and now talk to all the time with Glass. It feels like there's like this moment, like 4 or 5 years in as a professional photographer, where you are just like burnt out on the rest of it. Like if you could only take photos for a living, if that was your job, so many more photographers would stick with the profession. But like taking photos is like 5 to 10% of your job as a photographer, right? And that other 90% is always evolving, always changing, and increasingly becoming more and more miserable, right? Like you have to learn how to manipulate a different algorithm so the people that are already following you will then one day see your photos on these other platforms. And it's like the promise of community and photography on the internet doesn't really, exist anymore in the same way that it did in the early aughts before we commercialized the internet. And so, I put down my camera in 2012. I ran a photography studio from 2009 to 2012. Like had a couple of other shooters with me, came on board to run someone else's studio, grew that business really well. And at the end of that, I was just miserable. And it kind of coincided with Instagram coming out. So like Instagram came out and it was like fun to be on the internet and fun to post photos. Hooray, but that was fun for friendship. And I tricked myself into thinking that my iPhone photos at the time, right? iPhone 4, like my 4 megapixel photos were scratching that same itch for photography for me. And like in hindsight they weren't, but that's a me thing, not an iPhone thing, right? Like some members on Glass take exceptional photos with just their iPhone, and it is magic what you can do with your camera phone now. But like for me, it lost all the intentionality that needs to go into shooting for it to be the thing that it is for me, to like really hit that spot in my soul that makes me feel joy. And so for years I just, like posted it to Instagram, but that was it. I didn't like pick up my real camera, my DSLR, for like almost 4 years. And then I had a really great opportunity with a friend to shoot their nonprofit. It was a medical nonprofit named WOTC. And they provided healthcare for individuals in non-industrialized countries for relatively cheap. And so I got an introduction to the founding team through someone that I knew, and I said, "Hey, do you need any marketing help?" And they said, "No, but we do need someone to take photos on like an upcoming trip to visit a medical partner in Guatemala. Can you take photos?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. I used to be a professional photographer. How'd you know?" Right? So like I just lied. I was like, "Yep, I'm ready to go. Whatever you need." And they're like, "Great, we're flying out in like 7 days." And I was like, "Okay." And like overnight rented a Nikon D810 and a 24-70 2.8 to my home, and then like drove through the middle of the night to get to Seattle from Portland, because Seattle was the closest same day passport office. So I went to, get my same day passport, and like 4 days later met up with the team in Dallas Fort Worth airport while we were flying to Guatemala, and ended up taking 1,000 photos, give or take, for all of their marketing purposes and storytelling, and like just fell immediately back in love with it, because it wasn't I wasn't getting paid for this. I wasn't there was no transaction happening, and it was just like pure joy and like care, outward like helping, and getting to tell the stories of the the people in the indigenous population that we were helping was like life-changing for me, and it like reignited this passion for photography. That was in 2015. And so since then I've been pouring in, as my hobby, rinse and repeat. And then a few years later, my good friend Tom Watson, the co-founder and designer of Glass, reached out and was like, "Hey, I'm finally doing that thing that we've been talking about for years. I'm going to start Glass." And I was like, "Hell yeah, let's go." And that was, we worked privately, quietly for 18 months, more or less through the pandemic. They started designing and coding at the end of 2019, but it clearly took off. The amount of time that was available for a side project for nights and weekends exponentially grew in March of 2020. Yeah. And we had launched a private beta near the end of 2020, and then launched publicly in August of 2021. So we are about 2 months away from our 2-year anniversary, and here we are.
So before we get onto the app, you said a couple of things I want to touch on. You talked about posting on Flickr, like 11, 12 years old. Sorry, 11, 12 years old, or was that 2012?
So I started like perusing and using it when I was 12. Right, so it would have been 2001. Okay.
What were you shooting on back then?
2001 was my family's. It started with my family's Canon DV minicam video, right? Okay. The like little handheld camcorder that did the tiny DVD cameras. They had a 640 by 480 still pixelated, just garbage nonsense. I almost said, can I say a bad word? Because I almost described it as a bad word. It was a puddle, right? Like I grew up in Idaho, and I was surrounded by potato fields, and I used that camera was effectively a potato, right? And so like learned a potato, downloaded a cracked illegal version of Adobe Photoshop 3, I want to say, right? And then by the time I was like 15, I bought a I don't know if you remember the early aughts when you would buy software preloaded onto your laptops on eBay because it was a cracked key, so it would just like stay there. There was no like over there updates or checking that it was worked. So I bought my first Apple computer, like a PowerBook G4 preloaded with like $3,000 worth of stolen software for like $1,100 or something, and like really dove into learning all the technical digital editing aspects of it. So because I have a 640 by or whatever it is, like a 640 by 480 photo, right? That's like worthless. And so like learning to manipulate things in Photoshop was kind of the only hope that I had of having something good at the end. And then after that, we had I convinced one of my bosses at a radio station I worked at to buy a Canon 20D. So he'd like really went out on a limb for me and bought a Canon 20D. And then a few years later, I convinced a separate boss to buy a 24-70 2.8 Canon. So I shot with that rig for a real long time. And then when I started working professionally in the studio, I shot with, a 5D. And then ever since I've been back in it, it's either been Nikon, Leica, or now, as of a few weeks ago, Fujifilm GFX1.
Oh, wow. Yeah, awesome. Amazing. That's medium format, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a lie, right? Like it's not real medium format. The sensor size is still like like it's huge. But a 6x7 medium format is still like 2 times bigger. And so it's like, yes, it is way bigger than full frame, and that matters. And you get wild results, and like the dynamic range in it is bananas. But it's also still only like half the size of what a 6x7 frame is.
Right. You'd said that you sometimes shoot Leica, and I noticed going through glass, there seems to be a heck of a lot of Leica shooters on glass.
Yeah.
And I love what the Leica turns out. And going back to what you said about shooting with a cell phone, how some people on glass do such a great job posting their iPhone photos, but it wasn't the same for you. I was talking to Human Katuzi, who's on glass, who shoots Leica, and he was talking about how the camera is very kinesthetic, and it's just very physically pleasing, very a visceral experience. And maybe that's why just cell phone photography, no matter how good your cell phone, isn't doing it for you, because there's that element of being kind of that part of the camera. It's a very meditative practice. It's hard to do it, I think. I mean, you can have a technical result that's great on a phone, but you don't get the.
I think there are like a couple of things that are happening for me, right? Because I've been thinking a lot about this over the last couple of weeks. My co-host for the Glass podcast, Endless Appreciation, Sam Hurd, he's a local to Baltimore, where I live, wedding photographer, and he's like incredibly well known and sought after and adored for his like creative, artsy, different take on wedding photos. And he lent me the GFX and was like, "You're gonna love this camera." Every time I'd come to visit Baltimore before I moved here, I just like borrowed a weird camera from him. I was like, "Give me a weird camera, buddy. Like, just give me something strange." So every time it was just a different fancy camera with like some adapted lens from like the Soviet Union or something, rinse, repeat. And this last time he was like, "Okay, here's here's a medium format Fuji, you're gonna love it, and it's got a weird old adapted Nikon lens on it. Everything's manual focus. Good luck." And also, it's a 1.2 full frame. The aperture is 1.2 for a full frame. So when you correct that to a medium format, it's closer to like just under 1. It's like 0.95 for your depth of field. And so like you have a razor to focus on, and it's a little soft and it's a little weird. Enjoy. And I was like, I don't believe you. I don't think I'm actually going to have a nice time. Like at that point, I had been shooting with a Leica Q2 for almost 2 years. I got the Leica Q2 as my gift to myself for launching glass. Like that was our big hurrah. And so I I was like, no, now that I have a place where I can really take my photography seriously for me, I'm going to, like commit to that by spending amount of money that like hurts my soul. And so I did, and it's magical and I love it. And it's like the first camera I've ever loved, as opposed to like, I really love the photos it gets, or I love the end result, or I love this lens. It's like, I love this whole package and how it feels and how it uses it. And then Sam gave me this like massive, 4 times bigger, 6 times heavier weirdo camera. I was like, you're gonna like this better, you're gonna have a fun time. And I was like, I don't believe you, this is dumb and terrible. And then I took like 3 photos with it, and I was like, head over heels, sorry Sam, you're never getting this back, sort of moment. And like they're having, like the jump between taking photos on my camera to how I felt with taking photos on my Nikon D810 to taking photos on the Leica Q2 to now taking photos on the GFX 100S. There have been like, each time there's been like a jump of sincerity and a jump of like motion for me, right? Like of what it feels like internally as I'm making the work. The GFX, because of the lenses I have for it, is all manual focus. So like you have to manually focus it. I shoot wide open. It's just it's just my style. I if I have ever stopped something down, it's because I'm taking a long exposure of a landscape, right? Like other than that, I'm always shooting wide open. Whatever wide open may be, I am shooting it. So 2.8 if I'm shooting with a 24-70. On the Leica, that's 1.7, and on the lens that I have right now for the GFX, that's 1.4. It's just how I shoot. Wide open is my thing. And so like it slows me down, and it gives this like moment of uncertainty that doesn't exist with an iPhone camera, right? Like an iPhone camera, you're always going to get a good photo. It's really the good to great bridge is really hard to cross with an iPhone, because it's not meant for photographers. It's meant for families, right? Like it's meant for snapshots. It's meant for drinking with your friends. It's meant for parties. It's meant for kids' plays, right? Like it's not meant to capture a like a street image perfectly with a little bit of depth of field and like weird fall off. It's just not meant for that. And like those little edges, those little edges and those little imperfections are what I love. Ooh, there's a dog. There's another dog. And so like optimizing for I'm trying to wait, buddy. It would be great if you stopped. That's Poncho. Poncho loves to guest spot on any podcast I'm on.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
So like those little imperfections of like what happens when either you slip focus a little bit, or what slow down, have to wait, miss your moment, have to wait for another moment, right? Like if you're trying to take a snapshot, like I'm primarily a street photographer right now, with a little bit of portraiture work, and then I'm currently doing a weekly self-portrait project. And so I, like I'm shooting a varied amount of stuff, but all of the stuff that matters to me in my photography is at the margins, right? Like the difference, the difference of what I am shooting with myself, right? Like if I'm doing a self-portrait, I'm shooting, 50 to 100 photos per portrait that's published. And the stuff I'm changing is like a 1/4 inch of my head, or like leaning back a little bit, or leaning forward, or like slightly shifting my facial expression, or like moving the camera 6 inches to the right, or 6 inches back, or 12 inches forward, right? Like the little touches that are like affecting the image are the things that I'm caring about. And so the things that let me do that more and spend more time being like a hyper focused on these minute details that like will shift things for me, right? Like I notice these differences. I don't know if anyone else will, right? Like, but that's the point. Like it's not for them, it's for me. Like I am trying to share these little moments and these little edges, and taking the time and the focus and the energy to notice, and then try to control them, right? Like the magic in photography for me has always been it's really hard to get like perfect magical little moments. And so trying harder and harder to reproduce it on key, or like on demand as you need to, is like the really powerful stuff that gets my brain going. So yeah.
Your work actually on glass reminds me, you talk about street photography, a little bit of William Eggleston, which is pretty cool. So I don't know if you have any influences, but yeah, not to toot your horn too much. You mentioned when you fell in love with photography again, shooting Guatemala on that for the yes. And you shot on the 24 to 72.8, and I shoot similar enough at 28 to 70, and I just find how do you feel the differences? Because there's that, and there's like your 7200. Those are the two kind of like zooms, right?
Yeah.
That everyone has. So I feel like that 24 to 70 makes you, because you have to stand closer to get those close-up shots, it makes you feel more in that situation versus sniping from kind of the cheap seats there with the 7200. You can kind of feel that difference. How do you feel that it gives what feeling do you think that focal length gives the image? Yeah, in your documentary.
So I think there's like this inclination, or when you're earlier in photography, non-professional, or I don't want to use the term hobbyist, because like that's not, most photographers aren't hobbyists, right? Like I don't think that is the correct term for a lot of photographers, right? Like there's whatever the level is between professional and hobbyist, right? Of like, oh, you're not semi-pro, but like you're taking it more seriously than you would like woodworking. I apologize to all woodworkers.
My wife's a woodworker.
Yeah, carpentry is a wonderful, wonderful hobby. It's good enough for Jesus, so it's good enough for you, but not good enough for me. Photos only. There's like this level of like intention that I think goes into it, and effort. And I think earlier on, or before you're really deep in professional, I think that there's this inclination of you don't want to be there, right? Like you kind of like want to stay a little back. You want to, like as you described it, as like sniping these photos from far away, which is more comfortable for the photographer, but often leads to less dynamic images if you're shooting people, right? Like I think most of the time, I think you should get closer, right? And my photography tips can like be boiled down. Everything I've ever learned about photography is get closer, right? Like just step closer to your subject, step closer to whatever the thing is, like leave something to the imagination, right? Like most photographers, especially people that are just starting out, really want to show everything, right? Like here's the thing. But I think it's the little details that you can get in on that actually like make you feel more in the thing, right? Like an individual, like one of my favorite things in the world. the straightest thing about me is I love baseball. I just love baseball. And like I really love taking my camera to baseball games and taking photos of just a baseball game, right? And like a lot of the time people will go to a baseball game and they'll be like, here's the stadium, here's the field, but like you don't actually have a good enough point of view anywhere in the stadium to get like an exceptional, great, moving image of the field. You just don't, right? Like, but if you take like one of the photos that I took a couple of weeks ago at a game in Philadelphia, was just like of an old man watching the game, right? Just like you can see his white hair, you can see, so like I framed in really close. We can pull it up later. But so I like framed in really close and had the two people sitting, because he was a couple of rows in front. So I had the two people that were sitting there framing him tightly. And then his jersey was a Phillies jersey. And then like having the field way out of focus, way behind him. Or like, no, that's a different one. So like that, but that same sort of thing, right? Like that photo of those two old men is going to be better than any photo of like Shohei Ohtani that I could get, right? Like if you look at that photo again, there's the row my best friend was visiting, and so he bought us row 1 seats for that game because we're gonna see the best baseball player in the world go play baseball, so we might as well buy the best seats available. And we were just surrounded by Japanese tourists who flew in specifically to see Shohei play and pitch, and it was incredible. Like, there were like 3 people speaking English, and then everyone else was speaking Japanese around us. And I was like, I love baseball, but like world sport. But like those 2 old men, like those 2 old men talking and watching and like, getting their expressions is going to be a way more impactful image than anything I could take of like the obvious stuff. And so I think that one of the things that, like the 70 to 200 allows is like really tight shots and getting something close to that. But I prefer the emotion of like, given the option, I would rather shoot someone at like 24, 28, 35 up close than the same composition at 200, because like I think that there's like the compression that happens at 200, I think loses a little bit of the detail that I'm looking for, that like gritty detail. I don't know. Rambled a little bit, but like I'm a wide I'm a wide guy. So like my preferred length, my preferred zoom lens is an 85. My preferred focal length is 35 all day. And then like I have learned to love a 28 because that's what's on the Leica Q2. Before that, I was more of a 24 guy.
I like the I learned on a 18-55 kit, but then the nifty 50, the 51.8. And so I do love 50. 50 is a nice one because it's small. It's kind of like a pocket lens you could just take with you, and it's not very conspicuous.
Yeah.
And then that 28 to 70 or whatever that I have that barely comes off. I'm recording on the 50 right now, and so for the podcast I have it on, and for every day kind of walking around, I'll have it on. But for work I put on that zoom.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prairie View Photo Tours. Prairie View Photo Tours invites photographers of all levels to book their all-inclusive, authentic Alberta adventure at pvphototours.com.
One of my last, I kind of view my photography as like a 3-act play at the moment, right? Like it will eventually maybe have more acts, but the first act was like learning, experimentation, fun, whatever, joy. And then there was, starting in 2009, my professional career, and now my like reemergences and adoration of it, right? Like I'm in no way a professional photographer right now. I have just found a dream job that allows me to be around and in photography all day, talk about photography all day without all of the terrible bullshit that comes with being a photographer, right? Like image releases, location releases, booking, like chasing clients for money, everything that requires to earn a living from photography, like sucked my soul dry. But the like art of making and creating and like getting into an intimate space with a couple or an individual and taking like really meaningful portraits and spending time, like figuring out how I want to portray myself, or, getting comfortable in my own skin and my own body, is like, ooh, magic, right? And like that's where photography has come in, is like this little creative space for me, as opposed to a place that I need to like wring every ounce of potential engagement and potential attention and potential economy out of, right? Like that is terrifying to me. And so there's like those three switches, those 3 eras of my photography, right? Like acts. And the second one, I for almost a year and a half, whenever I was shooting personally for my own work, right, while I was running that studio, I never felt comfortable taking out like the full frame cameras that were owned by the studio, right? So I always had like my own Canon 50D that it was just, that's just my personal camera. And I used the Pancake 40 2.8 for almost 2 years exclusively. Like it was just the only lens that was on my camera. I had others, and I was just like, And so just like the little baby Canon pancake that was like, I don't know, like 10 centimeters tall or something, like real small. And it gave the weirdest little aberrations at the edges when you shot wide open, and I loved it. And so everyone, looked at me really weird when I'd like show up at the party with like, the smallest lens in the world. It's like the hand grip on the 50D stuck out further than the lens itself. And they were like, did you just like slap a cap on it? Like, are you just doing pinhole photography digitally? What's going on, man? And I'm like, no, this is great. It's $100, right? At the time, that was also incredible because I was significantly more economically challenged than I am now. And like, man, $100 for a nice lens that I could use for years. What a treat.
That's kind of like why the 50 is great, because it's $150, $200 or something like that. And you can get some great results with it. So yeah, totally understand that.
Ooh. It's like people's first real introduction to bokeh when you're like getting started of like, whoa, 1.8. Like what is it? There's like some that, like 2.8 is awesome, especially at like 70, or, like a 200 at f4 or whatever is also like, there's a lot of wonderful things that happen there. But man, when you get below 2, there's just, there's witchcraft in them there, little floaty bubbles.
You mentioned kind of the soul-sucking nature of like the non-photography aspects of a photography career. And one of those is for me, and I'm sure for you, definitely social media management. And I say for you because looking at your website, you are basically absent from online social media except for Glass. And your website specifically says the best way to get a hold of you is via email.
Regrettably, yep.
Yeah, regrettably. But I like the big one for photographers has been Instagram, and for a long time now, it's just been not enjoy it. Like I have such a hard time keeping up with it because I just don't enjoy it anymore. I do find enjoyment on Twitter. On YouTube, it's the podcast, a different thing. But I found I was actually out. I was shooting in Jasper with a friend from about an hour away from me, Grand Prairie, Alberta, up here in Canada. And we were just talking about social media and where we post our stuff. And he mentioned he's the one who told me about Glass, Jesse Wright on Glass. So thanks for that. Anyways, thanks. So I tried it out, and you guys have a two week trial. And so I'm like, I'll check it out. And was almost immediately hooked because of how simple it is, the minimalist aspect of it. There's none of that social media-ism about it, like the hashtags and the algorithms and the ads and the, short form video content or whatever. And it seems to be a pretty intimate community right now, but just really, really about the art of photography. So I love the app. We could talk all about it. And that's tell me about why maybe you're not on socials and why Glass
So I mean, I'm on. I have a Twitter that that I need to delete. Like Twitter legitimately was my favorite social network for a decade, almost 15 years, right? Like I've been on Twitter on and off since 2006, since it like was released, and I like really, really adored it. It was how I kept a lot of connections, a lot of networks, and Elon Musk is really bad at running Twitter. He's just really, really terrible at running that social network. And that was pretty brutal. And like the changes that have shifted there have like kind of fractured the network and the friend group that I had. And so now it's like, okay, cool. I can join 7 friends on Blue Sky and 6 friends on Mastodon and like 3 weirdos on LinkedIn, right? Because, so like the centralization of it really broke. And then like I do have an Instagram, but it's for friends, right? Like Instagram's a beautiful shopping app that you can DM your friends on, and that's right. Like if QVC was the best way to like send a text to your friends, we would use it. It's just not. It's Instagram, and there are like 3 things that happened all at once. That led to this, right? Flickr under Yahoo's mismanagement missed the boat on mobile, just straight up missed it, right? Like one of the magical things about Flickr back in the day was being able to easily get a photo on the internet and then share it elsewhere, right? Like you could embed it somewhere, you could put it in an iframe and post it on a forum, anywhere, right? Like early Web 2.0, before we commercialized the web with attention economies, ran on passion, right? Like it ran on what we cared about and connecting us with people that we cared about the same thing, right? Your common connection was whatever the hobby was, and then that common connection allowed your sense of community to deepen as you spent time there, right? Like that's how it used to work on the internet. Now it is, I need your eyeballs because I need to show you an ad every third thing, because that's how we maintain our $1 trillion market cap. Like that's that's just kind of the reality of the situation. So when Tom Watson was early at Facebook as a designer. He was one of like the first 15 designers to ever work at Facebook, right? He was in charge of web, or no. Sorry, I gotta get this right. He was in charge of mobile because they didn't have an app yet, because the iPhone, he got a company, BlackBerry. So like that's the level of early he was at. And then things rapidly changed, and when Facebook bought Instagram, it was like pretty clear what was going to happen, right? Like everyone was very distressed about it. It honestly took longer than we thought, right? Like everyone's like, oh no, Instagram's going to be dead in years, and it's like, no, it had a long tail of becoming what it is today. There were still like many good years while Facebook kind of didn't have all of its claws in it, and then Kevin Systrom, the co-founder of Instagram, left, and someone else was put in charge, and now it's just fully wrapped into everything that Facebook does. So Tom had the idea for Glass originally back then, right? Like right after it got bought, 2012. He's like, oh no, there's not going to be a nice photography community on the internet. So Instagram got bought. Flickr, after eating Flickr's the support for easily sharing things and following people and having like a feed didn't really exist, and they kind of just stripped everything out of Facebook's uploading flow, and just had like this really simple, here's your photo, here's your feed, right? Like Facebook's at the time feed was like, oh, here's one photo and here's your 18 things, but you got to click through, and each thing, like there were deepening layers to get through to the photos, and Instagram was like, no, just here's the photo, right? And that was really magical and really great. And then it, grew like wildfire, took over the world, and then became something that had to be optimized into the business model that Facebook had, which is attention economy. And so it kept dipping, and like where it matters for photographers is like your following count doesn't exist anymore. Like it doesn't matter. I was talking with a photographer this last weekend, Ryan Muirhead. He's a really exceptional film photographer out of Portland, Oregon. He has 150,000 plus followers on Instagram. It will regularly get like couple hundred likes per post, right? Like 150,000 people follow him, and he gets less than 0.5% of engagement, and less than 1% of views per photo, without paying. You have to, if you pay $5,000, you can get boosted to what your organic reach was before. And like that's terrible, and that's bad just in general, right? So like the vanity metric of, oh, you have a lot of followers, now it doesn't really matter, right? Like it makes people feel cool when they go to their profile page, but it doesn't mean anything, right? It only means getting views is only if you can do something that pleases the ever-changing, ever-growing algorithms on Instagram, right? Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, released a video a couple weeks ago of like, hey, here's how the algorithm works again. Now y'all know. And it's like, okay, but it's like it was like 10 minutes of just him making that noise. We're guessing, right? We're showing you whatever. It doesn't matter. You just got to look at Instagram, man. And like, that's not a way to live, right? And nor is it a way or a spot to make a living. And so like we cornered the market on, Instagram corners the market on photographers and this idea of like community and everyone needs to be there. And then built its entire brand on photographers and then pivoted away from them. And so Glass was this very simple idea of God, it sounds really broken when I describe it as simply and plainly as this. Glass is an ad-free, algorithm-free community of photographers that has a sustainable business model. That's it, right? You pay us $30 a year. You can sign up for, like we always have introductory offers that are 20 USD a year. And in exchange, you get a chronological feed, really nice photographers, very easy to navigate feed, and you upload photos, you get feedback on your photos, you can comment, you can find your people. We are not going to show them to you, right? Like we are not going to ever put something in your feed. We are never going to just be like, okay, well, Daniel's a really great photographer. He's posting really great portraits, right? Like now it's in your feed. That's not us. And that's it. That's the revolutionary idea of Glass of we trust you enough that you get to follow what you want. And that's it, right? Like it's very simple. We launched in August of 2021 with iOS only, and then a few months later we added Glass for web. A few months after that we added signing up on our website, so you could sign up for Glass without an iPhone, email, password. And then a few months after that, we had a iPad app, and now we have Android, Windows, wherever you are, we're there. It's just a business. We're just running a thing. We're selling a product instead of your attention, so therefore we have like little things, right? Like that as our core foundation of our business of we are not trying to get you addicted to this thing. It's just a nice place for you to be, leads to a lot of unexpected little things that are like marvelous, right? Like you can post a URL link. You can post a link in a comment or in a photo caption and it works. You don't just have the one in the bio that opens in a system, browser to keep you in the system so you exit out and then you're still on Instagram, right? Like we're not there are entire multi-million-dollar businesses that are built on the link in the bio, right? Like the different Linktree and Bento Box and like all of these different little things that's just like, oh, we're just trying to like fix the broken things that Instagram is making us do, as opposed to, oh yeah, you want to go somewhere else on the internet, go for it, right? Like those little shifts end up like causing a really weird thing to happen. It also means that people have a rough time getting started on Glass typically, right? Like when you sign up for Instagram right now, you tell it 3 things about you and it shows you a billion different things. Like you can reach the end of Glass. You like will regularly reach the end of Glass. If you follow 20 people and you catch up to what they've posted that day, you're done, right? Like you can keep exploring. You can look at camera pages, right? Like you can go look at the few photos that people have uploaded from the new Leica Q3, or you can look at, like that new Sony lens that you're thinking about buying. You can look at that lens page, but like the feed itself is, you reach the end, right? Like this chronological feed is it. If only 100 photos have been posted since you last checked, you're only going to see those 100 photos, and that's it.
So let's jump over onto Glass. I'll give a little screen share here, and we can talk about it as we go through. And I'm new to the screen sharing, so let's just make sure that we good here. Are we?
Yeah, we're all.
Can you see me?
All working in together. Oh, there I am. Hey, guy.
Hey. Okay, so yeah, so this is your profile. So this is just your feed of images, and I just love how it's just literally letting the work speak for itself. It's the photo, and if you like a photo, you click on it, and this is what I love. Up here is you have the EXIF data all included, so you can, I just love that. I love those little details.
There's a lot of little magic that happens in like knowing the EXIF data for a professional or, someone, an enthusiast, right? Like knowing that something is only ISO 100 or 200, or, knowing what focal length you're at, or what, like you can ask like, oh, what'd you shoot this at? Right. Like it doesn't have it on because it's an adapted lens on the GFX 100, the photos that we're looking at right now. You don't get the focal length, but if you go to a few later in my feed photos, you'll see a see, there's the one I was talking about with the baseball.
Are we up here?
Up a little more. We're gonna get my
this one here.
That one, yeah. There we go. Right, like that's better than any photo of a field, right? Like you can't fit in a full field and make it feel impactful, but like an old man watching baseball, like he's clearly sat there for like 50 years. I asked him, it was actually like 35. But like there's like there's a little magic that exists in that closeness. And so, but we don't have hashtags on Glass, so we categorize everything in categories. We have a new monthly category every month. So like this month's is rural. Last month was reflection. And so, like we have these different categories, a new one gets added every month, and it's kind of the theme for the month. But it, as people work through it and as people upload things and, go back through, you kind of get like this sense of, personally for me, right? Like you get this sense of like how you work and the type of work that you make and the type of photos that you take in a way that you weren't really cognizant of before, right? Like last month was reflection month on Glass.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out I take a lot of reflection photos, right? Like reflections are a recurring motif in my work that I didn't really realize, right? Like until I'm going back through and I'm like, oh, I have like 50 already uploaded. Here I am. And so, like there's this, a lot of how I talk about my own slowing down, figuring out the details, caring about the edges and the margins of your work, as opposed to just like, here's a cool photo, I hope it does well for the algorithm, right? Like when you're uploading for an algorithm, or when you're uploading trying to get reach and artificially trick a computer into showing your image to people who might like it, you are no longer making art for yourself. You are no longer creating for the art and act of creation. You are trying to trick a computer, and that's like a pretty grim way to live. Which, like you deserve better. And so, one of the things that's really tricky with Glass is that when people sign up and when people use it for the first time, it feels like work, right? Like it feels like there's effort that you have to put in to customize your feed, to find the people that you're looking for, to, like figure out that EXIF data is there and how to include it on your images. There's like all these little things that's like, oh, this feels like work, but it's just not being done for you. It's stuff that we should have always been doing. We've just kind of like switched to this Wall-E mode of consumption when it comes to a few of the apps and the programs that we use on a day-to-day basis, right? Like if you put down Instagram for a month and then you pick it back up, it's like a bizarro world, right? Like everything is exaggerated. Everyone's moving a little bit more. Everyone's acting a little different. Everyone's shouting a little more. There's like a little bit more rigidity and jitteriness to people's motion. Like everything about it is fine-tuned because one person has noticed that this little thing happens, right? When you do this. I'm a marketer and I do all the marketing and community management for Glass and all the social media stuff. And so, like we are taking Instagram more seriously as a channel for our platform. Be like, hey, Ryan Muirhead, that guy's great. You should follow him. Uh,
Done.
He's like just scrolls down. Okay. Anyway, so like this idea of like work and like getting people have kind of forgotten what organic or organic engagement feels like and what organic connection feels like, because everything has been so optimized to hell on the other platforms that we've all been, like boiling frog in the water put in.
Yeah.
Where, it just doesn't, it hits different when like 5 or 10 people comment on your photo on Glass than 50 people on Instagram. We have multiple photographers who are like hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram who put in the work on Glass and are seeing more people from a significantly smaller network, right? Like we measure we measure the number of accounts in 5 digits on Glass as opposed to the literal billions of people on Instagram. But like there is strength in that small but mighty number, and there is like real connection that exists. And because of how we've built it and how we've designed it, that connection and that vibe and that community scales, right? Like the when we started Glass, we started with a private beta of 100 people, and it was just like Tom and to a lesser extent me just going through everyone's photos and being like, hey, great job, I love this photo, right? And then when we added, when we launched, suddenly 25,000 people came through the door and we're like, whoa! Right? Like, hooray! But also, whoa, that's terrifying, right?
That's huge.
And so then it was like, okay, how do we make sure everyone's having a nice time doing what they're, like doing what they're supposed to be doing, that sort of thing. And there are a few different things that we've done along the way that like helped with that. We launched day one with reporting and blocking, so you could block someone that was harassing you. You could report comments and things that don't fit our code of conduct. We have a real code of conduct that's enforceable, and so like once a month, so okay, right? Because like being a troll is a way to get attention, right? Like every algorithm is built on amplification and divisiveness, right? Like there's no algorithm that is finely tuned to make sure everyone is nice. There's more money in
because we're so
outrage.
wired. Yes,
Yeah.
we're so wired to gravitate towards outrage that, of course, that's what grabs our attention, and the algorithm knows that. So it's just this negative feedback loop.
It like, and then it like rots all of our brains and like shatters democracy, right? Like there's more money in WhatsApp allowing genocide in Myanmar than being like, hey, don't, right? There are like so many different little things that we have had all of these like small unintended consequences that have like ballooned in scale and scope as tech has taken over the world and has VC backed internet companies have like cemented themselves as like interconnectivity of our lives, and so like Glass is our attempt to kind of like return back to that like earnest internet of the early aughts, like Web 2.0, where you're just connecting with people about a thing you care about. Yeah. And like sure there are like ways to there are ways to like return your experience to a calmer experience on other platforms, but like it's not real, right? And it's not extended, right? Like a chronological feed is marvelous. There's so much joy that happens in a chronological feed that we just don't get anywhere, right? Like that just doesn't exist on the internet. And sure, like, yeah, I switched to it, but now it's switched back, and now suddenly I've lost an hour because I wasn't paying attention and I just watched 87 cooking videos or like 12 climbing videos or whatever, right? Like it's so easy to just lose yourself in these things because that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to just, the like destroy your ability to pay attention to anything else, and to get like these little dopamine hits, right? Like it's just a dopamine casino of like, we know you're going to feel good when you get a little flash here. We know you're going to feel great when you get this notification saying that someone liked your thing. And there is something that is earning that your photos is because you have connected with them over weeks or months or years now, right? Like there are people who have been on Glass since the beginning. So we're coming up on 2 years of like this shared understanding, shared friendship, shared caring. And as more and more people join, they like get folded into this, and all these little sub networks and sub pockets and sub communities exist. And like it's magic. Like watching people organize themselves about a thing they care about, and then like watching that branch out and grow into something more is like the coolest part of my day every day.
So as you're talking there, you're seeing this refresh with new users come up here. Are these people that just joined the app that are now posting, or why are they being shown new to me?
It's just a different randomized list of our members.
And every time I sign in, this will be a different list.
Yeah.
Awesome. Can you take
so
us...
there's no...
Sorry, go ahead.
Right. So here, yeah. Oh, okay. So when you sign into Glass, there's your main feed, which if you are on your phone, it's a single feed of edge to edge image. If you are on, if you're on iPad or desktop, it's this beautiful, masonry grid of just here's beautiful photos, well categorized. You can mouse over on web and see who posted it. And then when you click through, you can see the XF data, if it's there, who posted it, when they uploaded it, when it was taken, and then the categories that they posted it to. You can post an image to 3 categories, and then you can comment, appreciate, share, bookmark. That's it. Like there's no dancing, there's no magic here. Well, no, there is magic here. There's just nothing behind the scenes happening. And then there's the explore page, which has just a member list with a bunch of film strips of their photos. So you can get, you can scroll through it, find, if you see someone's, so someone catches your eye, like that photo of the Grand Canyon, you can just kind of like click through, like, oh, I really like that. You can appreciate it. You can comment. If you keep looking at their photos, you keep liking it, you can just follow them if you decide to. And then outside of that, the next thing in the explore page is our highlight section. So our highlight section is where I just, share some of our favorite photographers, or a weekly set of photos from a photographer on the platform, our announcements, our favorites from the monthly category, what our new monthly category is, rinse, repeat. So this is, it's effectively our blog, but it is always human curated. It is always just focused on here it is. And then after that, it's our categories. So right now, I want to say we have like 34, 35 categories. We launched with 24, launched in October, whatever. I'm not going to do the math. That many categories. As you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, that's how many there are. So we add a new one every month. One day I'll stop, right? Like I know one day will be the last new monthly category. But not anytime soon, right? Like I've got a long list of stuff that's still going to get added. And we, like we purposefully only do one a month instead of like one a week or one like we don't want this to become just a huge grid of like hashtags and, you can post your photo to 10 categories or whatever. We don't want that, right? Like we want it tight. We want this to feel purposeful in how we do it, as opposed to the spray of like hoping that someone will show up and someone will see it, so you post it to 10 different hashtags or 100 different hashtags, right? Like it's not any way to live. So we don't live that way. So then you can dive in, explore categories. It's categorized so like long exposures, only the long exposure photos. So whatever you like as your own photography, or whatever you're trying to get into next. Long exposures is the thing that made me fall in love with photography.
Yeah,
like
I remember reading that.
Yeah, I mentioned in one of my in one of my captions on a post from a couple weeks ago of just like, it was the first time that I really mastered an aspect of photography for me, because I saw a photo and I really wanted to know how to take it. So then I just spent a really long time doing long exposures and finally got it right, and then just like fell in love. And so like getting back to that recently, I haven't taken a real long exposure for up until Glass launch for like a decade. And so now like peppering those in and doing one every couple of months has been like, oh, this feels great. And then you also have camera feeds and lens feeds. So that's a huge mess and a huge like pain in the ass on our end, right? Like doing this is terrible. So you can specifically lenses, but the camera feeds are also pretty gross. Camera companies are really bad at having standardized, cared for metadata on their cameras. So like Nikon, up until their last handful of mirrorless images, just didn't include anything. So when you would shoot something on like 24-70, the like hard 24-70 Nikon lens, it would just show, it would say 24-70 2.8. It would not say Nikkor 24, right? Like it would not tell you that it was a Nikkor. But the difference between a Canon 24-70 2.8 and a Nikkor 24-70 2.8 is vast, right? Like that, the difference between those two lenses is a lot in the details, and so like we couldn't really include them. It's a huge pain. So this is like a manually curated data management, right? Like we are, Stefan, our engineering co-founder, goes through and like cleans up metadata once a week, right? Like that's his thing of like, okay, well, I'm killing time, or like I'm procrastinating on something else, so I'm just gonna go turn on some new lenses, and we'll just spend an hour or two being miserable with like SQL queries to get this data out. But like it is,
that's great.
We like distinctly remembered, all three of us had this lie that we had told ourselves. Summer Murdoch's an incredible photographer. Definitely give her a follow. She does like magical things with water. She spends so much time shooting in the water. Oh, perfect. Like just unbelievably good vibes from her work. I don't know how she does it. I need to like interview her for our podcast, or get her on our highlight section so I can understand her connection with water, because it's so inspirational. And so, like that's the sort of thing that you can do, right? Like you find a photographer you really like who has something really incredible, and then you can just ask them a question and they respond, because this isn't it's not a rat race. No one is trying to monetize this, right? Like there's no great way to make money on glass. There are people who have made money on glass, but they're not like, they're not basing their entire income off of making sure their glass profile is nice in the same way that people try to do that with Instagram, or to a certain extent like TikTok or Facebook or their website, whatever, right? Like glass is specifically designed to be a community over a shared interest, and that shared interest is photography. And that is a very big difference than we have tricked you into assuming and pretending that like this is a place to make business, but it's actually a place for us to make money, right? Like Instagram and Meta products are just selling your attention to the highest bidder as opposed to you earning from it, right? And, that's not to say that there won't be tools and there won't be ways for people to make money on glass in the future. But right now, it's like exclusively just a community, just a place to get inspired, just a place to learn, just a place to grow and appreciate other people's work. And like there's something good about that. It is like after years and years of feeling like there wasn't really a place on the internet for us, and a place on the internet for like a calm shared love and adoration for a thing, right? You know, all of these places used to be forums, used to be Flickr groups, used to be, you know, to a certain extent like Facebook groups. And then as those products were either left and withered and died, you know, like forums shut down, people stopped paying the hosting bills, or, you know, Facebook pivoted to video or bought Instagram or like reshuffled their things. So deprioritized groups, deprioritized reach, deprioritized, right? Like you can lose your livelihood and lose your sense of community and self over a product manager's whim decision in a meeting in like Menlo Park. And that's a huge bummer. And so, you know, like we are the product, like explicitly. You are paying us money. We are giving you a service, as opposed to, you know, be here for free. We will make money off of you. And that shift does something once you get over that hump of putting in the initial effort to set up your network and set up your profile and like start finding people and start, for lack of a better word, decompressing from algorithms, right? And now, because, you know, I've been using Glass for almost 3 years now because of our private beta, but like I didn't actually think it was going to be for me, right? You know, like when we built this, I wanted it to exist. We wanted it to function and be out in the world. We wanted to try to like solve this little corner of the internet for our members. But I never thought personally that I would get its intended purpose out of it, right? Like I thought I was too jaded, too burnt out, too, you know, like been working on the internet at that point for nearly 20 years. I started very young. I started designing websites when I was 13. And so like I've been actively building communities and projects on the web for 20 years and was just like, it's done for me, right? Like the magical moments of a Flickr group that like impacts my life and like, you know, stopped making me be a suicidal teen in Idaho, was like gone, and it wasn't coming back. And it wasn't literally until like 7 or 8 months ago that Glass really like hit home for me. I was like, oh my God. And like, I think it was part of this fear of like it going away, right? You know, like so many apps come out right now. And like the traditional way for an app to come out right now is it raises $1 to $3 million in VC funding, launches itself, you know, flash in the pan, hello, it's here, and then it disappears, right? Because not enough people pay for it. They can't raise their next round. There's not a business model. It's just like, oh, we're figuring it out. We're trying cool stuff. And it's like, no, you're not. Like you just build something, charge for your product, do something, God, right? And that never happens. And so then these things disappear. And so I just like disconnected from caring about the things that I, you know, used and spent my time on, because I couldn't conceive of a thing sticking around long enough for it to like impact me and be something I could get attached to. And so like, you know, even actively building this platform and community and like making it effectively my life's work, right? Like Tom, Stefan, and I have been working on this night and day for 3 years now, have many more years that we're, you know, like going to continue to put into it. It's like, we are in this for the long haul. We are not trying to sell to someone. We are not trying to sell to someone. Like this is, we're building this because we want it to exist, and we are committed to it existing in the way that we think that protecting that little bit of magic that we've found. And like, even through all of that, all of these conversations, all of that effort, I didn't think it would be for me, right? Like I didn't think that I would get to partake in that magic. And then sometime at the beginning of this year and the last year, it just like all kind of snapped into place. And I was like, whoa, my God, I love the thing we made, right? Like, oh, I love these people. I love this place. I love how I feel. I'd like, oh, and like, it, you know, like awoken this like care about a thing on the internet. It helps that, you know, making it, but like it was for me. And that's like, that's a really weird, really powerful thing to have happen. And that's what's happening every day for a different member or a different set of members. And like, that's feels good.
Well, you know, it's a good business model, because people will pay for what they care about. And it's very evident that the people at Glass care about photography. That's what I love about it. It's I don't look at glass as so much as a way to market myself or promote, because it's just other photographers that are looking at it. But they really appreciate the art and they appreciate the photography itself, and that I just love being around that.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, same. Whew.
Awesome. Any quick question? Any plans of including a private messaging feature on Glass at some point in the future?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
It's one of those things that's hard. It's been hard to prioritize, because it is, like this is a fun look into the curtain of decision making, but it is it's a big vector for abuse, right, of like spam and someone, oh, I'll be nice in the comments, but I'll, like a really mean person in the DMs sort of thing. And so like we had talked about like including it at launch and like delaying our launch and like really focusing on it. But it was like, we're a team of 3, right? Like I am our trust and safety team, and I don't have time to manage that. And so we had to like ingrain the kindness and like the focus on photography and the community standards that we had a little better. And then and now it's become okay, we can get camera feeds or direct messages. We can get, and so it's like, it's one of those things that's hard to prioritize, but I imagine that what will end up happening, like all good things on Glass, it happens vaguely through a lot of hard work and then procrastination. So like how we work as a team is like, Tom will do all the product designs and like get really high fidelity thoughts, plans figured out, write-ups, this is how it works. And then it'll go into the queue and we'll like organize our roadmap as is, which we also change based on member requests and member feedback. If you go to features and what's coming, and like what we're working on now, and we change that based on who is using it and who is suggesting things. And like we have changed ordering before where it's like, oh yeah, we really think that this feature would be great next, but it's, oh no, it turns out people really want public profiles. Okay, great, we'll do public profiles, that sort of thing. And so we take community feedback in, and now it's gotten to the point that like one of those, so one of these days in the coming months, Tom will sit down one week and design what direct messages will look like. And then Stefan will have something that he is trying to ignore. And so then he'll write the API for fun. I'll be like, oops, I made it. So like direct messaging will come. There are a few other ones that I could probably confirm that are coming right now. We're working on a significantly improved search experience. So you'd be able to type in something like, oh, show me every yellow photo on Glass, and it'll just say, okay, here's every yellow photo, that sort of thing, along with a human curated feed where I will just be like, here are our favorite photos that are on Glass. And so like imagine if the Instagram Explore page was just me sitting there looking at photos being like, no, this is a good one, you guys should look at this photo, rinse, repeat, as opposed to 100 people like this photo, send it to the top, right? So yeah, so that's something we're working on right now, and hopefully that will be out before the end of summer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Daniel,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on today and joining me, taking time out of your busy schedule to chat about this wonderful app that we both call home. So that's great.
Hell yeah.
People can find your website, danielagee.com, is down below on the ticker as well. If they go to glass.photo, there'll be a /Daniel.
/Daniel, that's a good one.
If you're on /Daniel, yeah. If you're on Glass, it's just @Daniel. So that's the difference. And that's another cool thing I love about Glass is that it has you don't have to have the app to view kind of a public facing profile. So that's really cool too. So people can use it kind of as a bit of a current portfolio to see my current work, That's really nice.
A lot of people do that. It's really fun. We had someone book an incredibly large contract. They sent me an email about it a couple of months ago. They were like, yeah, I just made 30 grand because I sent someone my Glass profile. Like they were like negotiating through, and they were like, no. See, look, yeah, I can. Their like portfolio had X type of work, but they were shooting and pitching for more Y. That was on their glass portfolio, and they're like, no, here, just look at my glass profile, and they like sent it over, and they were like, yeah, this looks great. Here you go. And I was like, hell yeah, we should charge you more than $30. If you make more, if you suddenly make 100 or 1,000x more than the monthly fee, we should just bump that up a little bit. That's the future, right?
I got to keep it affordable. It's fantastic though. Yeah, thanks for coming on again. And people want to reach out to you. How do they reach out to do member feedback, talk about glass, ask about glass?
Just Daniel@glass.photo is my email.
Beauty. Sorry.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Have a great
day.
And we'll talk to you soon. See you on glass.
See you on the internet.